The history of Randolph County itself was filled with people that came up from the South. So most everybody that was in Indiana were Confederate sympathizers. For example, my family on my mother's side came from the state of Virginia. My dad's side came from North Carolina. And so, yes, all my relatives is from down south. And so that's basically the beginnings of Randolph County, Indiana. Well, the origins of Randolph County Asylum was the state of Indiana's first attempt at welfare. In other words, today, they hand you a handful of money and you can go buy booze, cigarettes, and drugs. Well, back then, you couldn't. The state of Indiana mandated every county in Indiana, 98 counties, mandated every county to build a place for poor people to live. And so, in other words, this is a poor farm. And every county in Indiana had one of these. Now, because Indiana mandated, you think, okay, Indiana's got a ton of money in these things, right? That's not true. The counties were mandated to build them. So in other words, each county is responsible for the cost of building and upkeep of these buildings. And so if something happened to a building, like if it burnt down, it's the county's duty to pay for the price of rebuilding it. Randolph County's idea of a poor farm would have been like a 2-story wooden log cabin. If you go outside around this building present day and you see the limestone foundation underneath this building present day, that log cabin was built on that very same foundation in 1851. That's an old foundation holding up this present building. This is the third building here. What do you think their heat source was in the first building?
The first building, wood?
Wood. It's a big old honking fireplace, not a little gas insert. It's a great big wood burning fireplace. The first cook stove was a wood-fired cook stove. And of course, needless to say, there was no electricity in 1851. And so they had oil lamps or candles. By 1857, they accidentally burnt the first building to the ground. There was absolutely, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to say this, there was absolutely no one hurt or killed in the fire from the first building. And nobody was killed. Nobody even got a broken fingernail. The county commissioners eyeballed that open lot and decided, well, we don't want another building to burn down. Let's build this one out of brick. The Martin family, I know that's my last name, but it wasn't my family because I don't have a penny to my name, and there would have been some money from this, invented the 4.5-inch diameter clay field tiles. And they were shipped all over the United States to help different farmers to drain their wetlands. So if they can build field tile, clay field tiles out of the soil here, they can build bricks. So the first thing that they have to build is a kiln. They got to build a kiln. They got to make the bricks, okay? Now, they didn't have any big temperature gauges, thermostats, or anything fancy, nothing like that like we do today. They went by the color of the mix as it was cooking. Like it showed a cherry red while it's cooking, they considered that as, all right, that's about the right temperature to make a brick. Do you know what the temperature has to be to make a brick? 1,600 degrees. It has to be. And if you don't make them 1,600 degrees, it's equivalent to you or me or anybody going out here in a field with a wheelbarrow and picking up dirt clods and trying to build something out of a dirt clod. What happens when it rains on a dirt clod? They got the building over here about halfway built, all right, and then a great big thunderstorm come up. And it's needless to say, the county commissioners hurried out here to see how their building was doing, and it wasn't doing. They obviously did not get the bricks hot enough. They would heat them up, make 100 of them, let them cool, and build with it immediately. And they weren't getting them hot enough and didn't realize it until it was too late. And so the common sense thing to do to save the county taxpayers money would be to tear it down and start over. Common sense pretty much was out the window at that time. What they did was they hired 14 guys to live in the building over here that was halfway built. And every time the weather would change as they would continue to build it, these 14 guys would stop what they were doing and repair what was damaged. Now, that's not common sense. I realize it isn't, but that's truly what they did. And so they got the second building done. It was done around 1891. And lo and behold, I know Kate told you this a little bit ago about a tornado that came through here in March of last year. Back in 1896, I believe, there was another tornado that came through here. And needless to say, out come your county commissioners and checked it over, and it was beyond repair. It was definitely beyond repair. One of the county commissioners had to have been smarter than the others. There's always one that probably really does deserve the other job, and he's not a little big man. Okay, so he walked over here to where the first building burnt down and looked over the limestone foundation that was still here. He said, let's hire a couple engineers. Let's engineer a brand new building. Let's fix the cracks in this old foundation and build a new building right on top of this original foundation. And that's by golly what they did. This building that we're in right now was started in 1897. It was done in 1899, about 3 weeks short of 2 complete years. And so they decided they were going to build it right here on this original foundation, and we're going to do it right this time. So in other words, the bricks are going to be the right temperature, and it's going to be done right. So third time's a charm for them, and that's exactly how this building come into being in this time. This is probably one of the sturdiest buildings in the county. Because this is a 66,000 square foot Romanesque revival style architectural shaped building. It was shaped like a cross, so if you're flying over it in a drone or a helicopter or anything, you can see the cross. It was shaped like a cross to promote Christianity. It really was. And it stayed that way. Now, since 1899, there had been a total of 1,498 people go through these doors in this building, and it closed in 2006. When people first came here to live, they're asked, what can you do to help us here? That doesn't mean, hey, you've got to go out and work on the farm here to live here. No, nobody had to. If you wanted to go in there and sit in a rocking chair and look out the window for 12 hours a day, you're still going to get 3 meals a day and walls and a roof over your head. It's free. It's a free ride, is what it is. And it was a lifesaver for a lot of people. A lot of people. A lot of women were intentionally brought here. And I don't know what they labeled them, but what they really were was back in the day was a lot different than it is today, okay? Back in the day, if you was an unwed mother, that was shameful. I'll say it. That was shameful. Okay, back in the day, there was a lot of unwed so-called mothers coming out here, and they lived here. And then they would have the baby here, or they would have it out at the orphan's home and have it passed on for adoption. And yes, that happened here. The women, they were definitely labeled wrong. Doors finally closed here. They opened in 1899. The doors finally closed here in 2006. That was the last time it was open. All right. The county knew that it was not a money-making proposition. Nobody's got to pay to live here. Okay. And you can only make X amount of dollars off of a farm, especially today, especially in a more modern day. Okay. And so it wasn't making enough money to even pay for the food for the people that lives here. Okay. And so the county's going to close it. And we don't know what to do with it. We got no idea. It was going to be probably a parking lot for the 4-H grounds across the road. Probably what it was going to be. These guys that bought it, the Allen brothers, come up with a working plan.
We started STOP because we just kept seeing these old, beautiful buildings getting torn down because they couldn't think anything to do with them, or somebody was going to turn them into something they didn't want. And so we started this to save the inside and out for plethora of reasons, for the history, for educational. That's how it all started, just trying to save a particular building from the wrecking ball. And we didn't know the place was haunted, never even thought about it. Gutters were all tore off, and the locals said, oh, make beautiful icicles in the winter, but that's death to a building. Water gets down, gets in the foundation, freezes and thaws and cracks the foundation. So I asked about it. I asked one of the county commissioners, and he said, if you have a good business plan and we'll talk. Well, we're just going to do what we did at the jail. Just fix it up and let people come in and do their thing. So they liked the idea, and so that's how we ended up with this one.
And they offered X amount of dollars. I don't know what they offered. I don't even want to know. But they offered X amount of dollars and presented their working plan to the commissioners, and they sold. We got it. Well, the judge came here. I know I'm kind of stuck on this number, but the judge come here in 1938. He retired. He was a Randolph County judge, is what he was. He come out here, looked around, and he found out that he knew most of the people out here. And he asked the county commissioner, now he's a judge, he's a retired lawyer. He doesn't deserve to live in a poor farm. You know that, and I know that. Okay. He told the county commissioners, I've had dealings with most of them people out there. I've got no family left. He says, if you all let me live out here, I'll pay you rent. Commissioner jumped on it, and I don't blame him. And so he was asked, when the judge first come out here, he was asked, like everybody else, what can you do to help us out here? Well, he's not a farmer. He's not a farmer. He doesn't know what to do. But he was appointed a job. His job is to keep security out here, something that he's been used to. So about the first week he lives out here, he took the caretaker. They went to Randolph County Jail and purchased a jail cell, disassembled it, and brought it back out here. And up on the second floor in one of the slanted wall rooms, there is a jail cell out there. And because he's acting the role of a judge, he is permitted by the caretaker to hold mock trials up in the attic. And so in other words, if he finds you guilty of maybe stealing $100 out of somebody, he's got a jail cell he can put you in. And the whole purpose of that was just before World War II. The whole purpose of that was he was sure that we was going to get some people out here that nobody would have liked, men. And he was referring to alcoholic draft dodgers. During World War II, if you were an alcoholic, you did not get drafted. And so there were 4 people from Winchester that did not get drafted because they were alcoholics. They had no place to live when they were turned down by the Army and the Marines. So they must have been really sorry to be turned down at the time of war. You know, they must have been real sorry. And so they come out here to live. 4 people. And these 4 guys got together out here. They're going to run this building. And so these 4 guys got together one night, went over to the lady's side, pulled off a gang rape, and got away with it. Because everybody is terrified of these 4 guys. Nobody will rat them out. Old John Oliver Champ is an old 86-year-old man that used to live here. He was not afraid of the thugs, the draft dodgers. He was not, and he told them, he said, my God, if I see you, I'll testify against you. You need to be in the jail cell down yonder. Well, they didn't like him either because John Oliver lived right next door to the judge up on the next floor. He's brown nose. So what they thought. So every year there's a fall cleanup day out here. And so John Oliver was required to clean out his room, dust the furniture, wash the window on the inside and out. Yes, I said wash. I'm from Indiana. It's not wash, it's wash. Okay? And so he's required to wash the window. He's 86 years old. He's not going to go up on an extension ladder and do the outside. So what John Oliver do? He opened the window. He stood on a chair and got up as high as he could reach off of a chair, opened the window up halfway, sat down backwards in the windowsill, closed the window down on his legs to hold him in place. And while he's reaching up as high as he can reach, 2 of them thugs walked by his room and seen him sitting in the window. They said, this'll be easy. This'll look like an accident. They ran in his room, threw open the window, picked his legs up, and pushed him over backwards out the second floor window, almost right straight above us right here, and killed him. He landed on the back of his neck and broke his neck. And the county commissioners knew who was causing the trouble out here. And so from what I understand, they called down at East Haven, down at Richmond. It's the Indiana State Mental Hospital down there. They called down there, had all 4 of these guys from here transferred down to there. And these 4 guys spent supposedly the rest of their life in a padded cell and straitjackets. So they got exactly what they had coming. Her name was Lulu Wood. Lulu's mother is sick and she's dying. Well, before Lulu's mother got that sick, she remarried. So Lulu is 14 years old. Lulu has a stepdad. And it's going to go to pot from here then. Stepdad was not worth pounding sand in a rat hole to save. He really wasn't. All he could think about was getting Lulu's mama's money, and then he was going to bring Lulu, 14-year-old Lulu, out here and live for nothing. But that was his plan. Well, mama died, and he went through Lulu's mama's money like water. And
better to just hold that thought.
well, wait till you hear the rest of this story. And I'm not afraid to hide the names. Not from him either. I can prove this too. Okay, Lulu's mama passed away and stepdad went through her money like water. All right, and then about 3 weeks later, Lulu and stepdad come out here to take up residence out here to see if they qualified. Well, they walked in the very same front door that you probably did when you come in, and the caretaker was sitting there at the desk, very same desk up there, and he signed them in. Well, the caretaker noticed that they both have the same last name, and he so stated so. He said, we're a little short on space out here right at the time. He said, you guys are obviously family. You got the same last name. Why don't you guys share a room? Well, even in 1915, when all this was taking place, that's not a good idea. And stepdad done exactly like you think he would. They call it statutory rape today. And not only that, he got her pregnant. All right. Now, they let him move here. Caretaker don't know it. Caretaker knows nothing going on. You know, they're sharing a room. And he doesn't know there's anything going on. Well, the men, no men are giving Lulu a bad time. She's only 14 years old, for crying out loud. Nobody's giving her a bad time. But the women are. Well, the women would treat her and tell her verbally to her face, what on earth did you do or say to him to make him do such a nasty thing like that to you? In other words, they're blaming this poor little girl. And I don't even think she was old enough to know what was going on. She's tired of them giving her a bad time and thinking she's a little tramp and everything. You know, she's tired of them doing that to her. She has the baby right here. Now, you tell me, let's say she's 15 by now. You tell me what a little 15-year-old girl knows about raising a baby. She doesn't know anything. And there are ladies out here that's had babies that would help her, but will they? Of course not. They think she's a little tramp. They have nothing at all to do with her. And so Lulu's just decided, by golly, she's going to do the best she can. And so one night she puts little Sarah Lucinda, it was a little girl she had. Lulu puts little Sarah Lucinda to bed upstairs in the nursery. Sarah Lucinda has the colic. She's coughing, gagging, choking, crying, carrying on, making all kinds of noise. Lulu pulls the rocking chair up beside Sarah's cradle or bed and sits with Sarah all night and tries to comfort her the best she can. Well, right next door to the nursery upstairs, there is another lady's full-size room, sleeping room. And there's a lady in there. And needless to say, the baby keeps the lady up all night. The very next morning, the lady next door gets up gets herself a ride to the county commissioner's office in Winchester and rats Lulu out for having a disruptive baby out there all night long. Well, a couple days later, here comes the county commissioners, the little big shots. Here comes the county commissioners. I was a county councilman, so I can badmouth them if I want to. Okay, so county commissioners, here they come. They walk in Lulu's room, walk right straight back to Sarah Lucinda's bed, pick up the baby, and walk right out the nursery door and takes that baby straight away right out to the orphan's home and gives it up for adoption. In other words, they stole Lulu's baby. Now, they couldn't get away with that today, but back then they thought they could, and so they did. So needless to say, Lulu is very, very, very upset. Well, if somebody doesn't have the money to pay for a funeral, you get a pauper's funeral. Now, keep in mind that embalming pre-1900 was invented. It was a guy by the name of Dr. Letterman. He was a Union doctor, and it's the day after the Battle of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And he's up there at Gettysburg, and there's all these dead soldiers every place around, thousands of dead. There's as many people in Gettysburg killed as there was in the entire Vietnam War. Well, Dr. Letterman invented embalming. And that was so he could send Southern Confederate troops back home to be buried in their hometown graveyards. Do you know how a mortician used to send a cadaver back home south? They would buy a train car full of ice and throw the body up on top of the ice and hope it made it back down home before the ice melted. And that's the way they used to try to get them down there before Letterman invented embalming. And so people had wakes instead of being embalmed. They're set in a pine box, and then there's a group of people that sits on a bench and watches that person in a pine box for 24 hours to make sure that they don't wake up. Now, you've heard of the old saying, saved by the bell or the dead ringer. That's where that stuff came from. That's from people being buried alive, and they were terrified of it. And I could see why.
And they used to put a string down, right? With the bell.
Right, they drive a pipe in the ground and stick a rope through the middle of that pipe into the casket and tie it around the cadaver's hand, and then you're sitting there. Let's say you're sitting there some summer night out there in the graveyard, and it's your job to listen for the bell to ring. And you hear ding, 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 ding. God, where is that? Where is that? Okay, I see you. Now, I haven't got a backhoe. Okay, ain't been vetted yet. I got a spade. I'm not going to get you out there in time. It's just probably not going to work. Imagine that. Imagine that.
That's crazy.
There are 51 people from this building buried out there and one mummy. Now, I seen you raise your eyebrows. You're saying, where's a mummy? Right. Over in New Paris, Ohio, about 25 miles from here, back in the late 30s, there was a black man passed away over there. Nobody knew his real name. They call him Mose. Okay? Well, when he died, they tried to run ads in the Dayton newspaper and all the way around Columbus and all that to get somebody to come get him. And nobody came and got him. Nobody came and got him. There's a couple guys over there that decided, keep in mind, this is right at the end of the Depression, a way to make some money. And so they picked Mose up. These two guys picked Mose up, wrapped him in muslin cloth, and rolled him around the dirt to make it look old, put him in the back of their vehicles, and went around to every little town on the Indiana and Ohio border right here and put up a tent and set Mose out on display and charged 10 cents a head for people to peek at the real Egyptian mummy. This is true. This is in the state of Ohio's history book. It really is. It is an absolute true story. Well, keep in mind, Mose is not embalmed. And so the longer they keep him out, the worse he smells. All right, so finally, by the time they came to Winchester, Indiana, because it's just a few miles over there in New Paris, by the time they came to Winchester, Indiana, Mose was ripe. And they had him in a tent right up there on our courthouse lawn. And people lined up almost clear around the block to see the real Egyptian mummy. All right, people would pay their dime, walk in the building, see the mummy, and smell. And it was making people sick to smell. And it finally made a couple people mad. And they went right straight to the sheriff. Well, you can't carry a stiff around in the trunk of your car legally. You just cannot do that and put him on display and stuff like that. You can't do that. So the sheriff arrested these two guys and took Mose away from him. Well, what's the sheriff going to do with Mose? Well, he was aware that there was a pauper cemetery out here, so he brought him Mose right out here, and he buried right out here behind one of our barns. And so that's how come there are 51 people and one mummy buried. I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth. That's a true story. He's out there someplace. Okay, her name is Ida Gungle, Gunkle, I believe, Ida Gungle. She is brought here by her son 8 years before she's brought here by her son and left here. Her husband passed away, got sick and died. He died of syphilis. No cure. In other words, it was going to get to your brain, destroy your sanity, and then kill you. Here's what it was going to do. There's no hope. No hope. All right. 2 years before she's brought here by her son, her oldest and favorite daughter got sick and died. Her son lived down the road down there. He decided he would take her home with him to make whatever much of her life that there is tolerable. He can't do anything with her. And so he packs her up one day, loads her up, brings her up here, and sits in there in the living room and talks to the caretaker and caretaker's wife about leaving her here. Well, the caretaker done the worst thing that they could possibly do. They took her and they put her right here on this floor on the other aisle, on the lady's side. She would get up out of bed over there, come out in the hallway here, run up and down the hallway, screaming and crying and carrying on, ripping at her gown, messing down her leg, and then getting down, rolling in it like a dog. This lady was messed up. Okay, she was messed up. Well, one day, the old caretaker was coming in the front door when Ida was carrying on his conniptions out here in the hall. And he heard it. And he opened the door and looked and seen her rolling around on the ground in her own filth. And he said, oh my God. But he remembers that this particular building that we're in right here was built on the old limestone foundation of the very first building. There's one room down in the basement, just about right below us. There's one room down there that has bars in the window. They were put there in 1851. We don't have no clue why, and still don't know. But guess what? Caretaker knows what he's going to do with that room. Guess where Ida's going? Every night, his wife comes down the hallway down there in the basement, walks by Ida and checks on her, pulls the door shut and locks it. One night, Mrs. Thornburg coming down the hall, Ida heard her coming and hollered for her. Thornburg, come here. Ida wanted a broom. Get me a broom, Thornburg. Miss Thornburg wondered, boy, is she going to really clean up this hog sty of a room of hers? You reckon she's learning something? She went and got her a broom, a stick broom, just like we use today. Miss Thornburg gets up the next morning at 5:30, and the first thing she does is downstairs and checks on Ida. She opened the door, and Ida is dead. She hung herself with that broom. There's two pipes that are running parallel to each other down the hall or across the ceiling. They're about that far apart. Ida, if she gets up and stands on her bunk, she can reach them pipes, which is exactly what she did. She got up there and laid that broom perpendicular across them two parallel pipes. So while she's still standing on her bunk, she gets down, throws the sheets back, gets down to the mattress, and rips about a 4-foot strip of that heavy mattress material off the mattress, ties it around that broom, and is hanging down right in front of her neck. But she's probably about right here with it. She takes the loose end of it, still standing on the chair, or on the bed, ties it around her neck, and then she walks off the bed. When Mrs. Thornburg found her the next morning, Ida's feet was on the ground. Ida had just went ahead and dropped forwards. It is leaning forwards about a 45-degree angle against that knot around. Ida choked herself to death. It wasn't clean. It wasn't clean, and I'm sure it was agonizing. And so Ida is still here. She probably can't move on. I don't know how much a Christian upbringing you got, but I do. And I know suicide's no. I know that's a no-no. I don't think she can move on. And so there was a guy from Terre Haute doing a podcast here. He went right straight to her room, had a spirit box and a recorder. And the first thing he asked her, Ida, what do you think of Ted Martin telling everybody the way you killed yourself when they walk in the door? She answered him, I want that guy dead. That's me she wants dead. I got to work here. I don't want me dead. Okay? And it bothered me. It really did. That spooked me. And that's about one of the few things that's happened to me here that spooked me here. But that did. All right. He got it. I'll tell that story because she is still here. But I don't do it down there in that room. Have you been down in the basement? Have you been down in that kitchen?
Yep.
You seen the picture of the old woman?
Yep.
That's Doris Addington. Doris cooked here for 71 years, 70 years. Let's go back to the 1920s. Okay, there's a car pulls up out here off of 27. 3 young girls get out of that car, come up here and sit on the front steps. Well, this is the Addington sisters. And they no sooner drove away than what the caretaker walked out the door. You can't tell me he wasn't in on it. I know he was in on it. He said, and what is it that you want to do to help us out here? She says, Doris says, and she didn't even stutter. I bet she didn't. I'm guessing because I personally knew her. She says, I am 11 years old and I know how to cook. And that's what I'm going to do. And so he, oh, okay, Doris, okay. He says, tell you what, he said, you go downstairs and get with Mary, who was a volunteer first cook here at the time. He says, you work with Mary for 2 years, learn the ropes, and he says, it's all yours. Well, Mary didn't live 2 years. She got sick and died. So before Doris is even 13 years old, she's cooking 3 meals a day for an average of 45 people out here every meal. One night I was at the Friends Church, a Quaker church in Winchester, and she cooked. And I seen her come out of the kitchen. I don't know whether it was to take a smoke break or what, but she'd come out of the kitchen. And I went over and started talking to her. And she told me the story about her sisters leaving her here. Well, one time the Lions Club was going to cook a meal. So she went in, and the president of the Lions Club asked her, he said, Doris, he says, we've offered to pay you. He says, surely there's something that we can do for you that you would like. Surely there's something that we can do for you. Well, the president of the Lions Club found out that she loved dolls. Dolls. I don't. Them things freak me out, okay? She loved dolls. And so the president of the Lions Club bought her a doll. And needless to say, it come back out here with her, wherever room she was in. It came back out here. Well, he told the different organizations around town that she loved dolls. Everybody started buying her a doll. They were in every room that she lived in out here, including the room that she passed away in 1984 when she was 81 years old. She died of H1N1 bird flu. Now, there have been several people that's heard this story, and they'll bring her a doll. And they'll present it to her, but you want to make sure you got your spirit box turned on, because she has never neglected not to thank somebody for giving her a doll. Never. She always thanks them for giving her a beautiful doll. A beautiful doll. All right. And she still does do it, by the way. She is definitely still here. Well, I'll tell you this right off the bat, the most haunted place in this building is by far the basement. Number 2 is the attic. Number 3 is the ladies' side, first floor. Number 4 is the men's side, second floor, where the jail cell is. And so I would say basement, attic, ladies' side, men's side. Okay, that's there's 4 places here that are hot. So that's my recommendation.